Hi everyone, I'm Ileana, and today's speaker is Dr. Isaiah Raggow. Sorry, say your last name for me. Raggow. Say again.
Raggow.
Raggow. Okay. He was born in a small town in northern Michigan. Upon graduation from high school, he joined the United States Navy for 10 years, in which he served as a chaplain's assistant. Upon his honorable discharge, he went to community college and then transferred to UC Davis, where he obtained a degree in nutrition science with a focus on biochemistry. He then went to medical school at UC Riverside and recruited physicians specifically for primary care roles. He completed his family medicine residency in Santa Maria, California, and now serves as the medical director of a small network of clinics in Northern California near Mount Shasta. Did I freeze?
No, is it my turn to speak?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Again, like I said, my name's Isaiah Raggow. I'm an MD up in Mount Shasta, California. I work for Dignity Health, but just want to say, like, anything I say doesn't really reflect their particular positions on anything. This is just me speaking about my experience. So I was asked to come here today to talk about my path from rather humble beginnings to where I am today. So I was born to two parents. Mom was an artist, dad was a farmer. We had a sheep farm and mom spun the wool for it to make her art. So didn't make a whole lot of money in that world, but my parents did know how to conserve money and they taught me the value of frugality. So I took that with me through high school, and I didn't really want to go to college at the time because I was not too interested in school then. And so I said, I'll go to the Navy. And also in high school, a lot of my friends were joining the Navy. So it's in high school, you do what your friends do. So I did that. And I did that for about 7 years. And then I was deployed to Iraq, to Baghdad, to the United States Embassy. And while there's a lot of downtime. And so I was reading a lot and I started getting interested in nutrition and the effect that had on my health. And I didn't understand the connection between the food I ate and the health that I had. And so I really made some major changes in my health and my diet. And I give credit to Dr. Weil, who's a big pioneer in the health and nutrition space and has been for a long time. So that got me interested in nutrition science. And that's when I got into my head to go back to school. But I had to let my enlistment run out because I just re-enlisted. So I ended up staying for 3 more years until about 2007. And that's when I left and moved out to California to start school. So one thing I did have was my GI Bill. And that was basically 3 years worth of school covered. That's basically the deal of how that works when you get the GI Bill. And it wasn't all that hard to go through the paperwork and that sort of thing. There's usually a military liaison at most schools. And so they know how the GI Bill works and how to help veterans get plugged in. So if for those people transitioning from the military to the civilian world and going to school, the one thing is recommended is to find those mentors. And there's some sort of student resource center or some equivalent in the school, and then you tap into them and they can help you out with a lot of those sorts of things. So I came to California. I started at a little community college called Kenyatta, which is in the Bay Area, somewhat halfway between San Jose and San Francisco. And so my first year, I didn't have any credentials. I didn't have any clout. So I had to pay my own way. So the GI Bill paid for room and board, paid for tuition, paid for books, paid for everything. And I didn't have to work, which is really important. Working while going to school is a -1 to things because if you're working, that means you're not studying. And so I approached my school as a job. So I put forth the work required one would expect at any workplace where high performance is expected. So what I did is in the first year of community college, I took my basic classes as always, but then I got plugged into local community events, community projects, volunteering. What else did I do? I tried to get as involved in as many things as possible. So that way I could build my resume, my academic resume. And then I started applying for grants and scholarships. So that way, by the time the second year rolled around, I could sometimes skip I could not tap into the GI Bill, because the GI Bill isn't necessarily continuous 3 years. You just have 3 years worth of money in there. So and so I would sometimes skip some semesters because I didn't need the GI Bill. And that came to be an advantage later. So basically by the second year of community college, I had now, of course, good grades is important. Of course, if you don't have the grades, that does matter. It matters a lot. So I had done all my partying back in my 20s, so I didn't need to do all that. So that wasn't important. I didn't join any fraternities. It was a job. I went to school, I studied, I went to office hours, I put my nose down, and I got straight A's, and I got involved, and that got me the ride that I needed to pay for school. Then at the end of 2 years, our college had an agreement with Berkeley and with UC Davis that enabled us to just directly transfer. We didn't have to audition. I think it was maybe like a letter of intent or some sort of vague, like 1-page letter I had to write. And it basically is a guaranteed acceptance into a UC. So, and I could have gone to a state school, because at the time I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to be a doctor or not. At the time I was just going to be a nutritionist. That was the original plan. But then as I learned more about medicine, or not really so much medicine, but more about physiology and how the body worked, I got more interested in medicine. And then I could find like, oh, I can use nutrition and tap that into medicine as well. And they're not mutually exclusive. So I said, well, nutritionists are a little bit limited in their scope because they can't diagnose, they can't treat disease, they can help out. And also they only really work most of the time with people who are already healthy and you're trying to get them healthier, as opposed to people who are really sick that you need to maybe know the medications, and you need to know the biochemical processes and how the body gets sick, and how is there any way to fix things, or are they now on a path where they can't get off the patient? What I mean. So I said, I'll be a dietitian instead. So I interned, and internships is important too. So internships, tapping into that student resource place, saying, hey, I want to get involved. I want to learn stuff. So to find out what you don't want to do, almost internships are more for what you don't want to do, finding out then what you want to do. So I did an internship with dietitians. I didn't care for that at all. All they did was make diet for the hospital and nutrition bags for the floors for like IV and the tube feeds. So they made those. That was not my thing. I didn't really care for it. But then a volunteer position opened up at that same hospital for a volunteer at the emergency department to help out. And that was a lot of fun. And I really did enjoy that. And I was like, okay, that clinches it. I want to be a doctor, because that was way more interesting. So I got an automatic acceptance to UC Davis. I got scholarships, I got grants. I think I had to tap into GI Bill a little bit to top it off, but still I didn't have to work. It wasn't required. So I got involved there. I got involved with the PhDs there, tried to do a little research. I will say one downside of going to community college first instead of a 4-year is that research exposure is limited, because community colleges are just about teaching the material and not much else. Whereas the 4-year universities, the University of California, Berkeley, the private schools, they've got PhDs there. There's more experience for research, which when you're applying for medical school matters. You want to have at least one something research, having your name on a study in your portfolio, because you're going to be competing with people who do that. So you have to have at least something. So the downside is when you go to a 4-year college, you could start right away your freshman year working in a lab with a professor that you're with. And then you're now in that lab for 4 years. You can bet that letter of recommendation at the end of that 4-year period is going to be pretty awesome. So downside is with the community college, you only get 2 years of that experience, and you show up as a junior at that 4-year college. You can still go into a lab and you can still get a letter of recommendation, but it won't look as good. It's a fine point. It's not critical. I still like the community college path that I took, and I wouldn't trade it, because there is that personal care and that personal attention that a class size of 35 students as opposed to 600 students, you get a lot more one-on-one time with the professor. But however, with the 600 student people, really there's only maybe 300 of you, because the other 300 are checked out and they're only there to check a box. And there's PhDs there that are teachers assistants, and they hold office hours. And so you can get a lot of exposure if you hang out with the PhD folks in your 4-year school. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So I was at Davis. I got plugged into a lab. I did all the things you're supposed to do. Again, volunteering. I got really involved in the homeless community in Davis, and that was and I really did enjoy it. But it was my community service box to check off, because again, medical school is basically a lot of boxes to check off. And if you've got the volunteer box checked and you got over a 3.8, 3.9 grade point average, and oh yeah, there's the MCAT now you got to do at some point. And are you involved in your community? Are you involved on campus? So all those things, because that's what they're looking for, are those items. So I was doing all that, doing fine. That's where I met Jubin, actually, was through UC Davis and the pre-med program. And so he helped me out as well. I got to do the surgical internship thing, which did not work for me personally, because I just don't like surgery that much. But it was something to do to see if I liked it or not. It turns out I didn't. So I like the more medicine, like the clinic. I like the clinic a lot, and that's what I'm doing right now. is purely outpatient clinic work, which is my personal interest. So let's see here, what else? So I really made sure to maintain my fitness, like my physical fitness during this time, because there's a definite connection between your physical health, like how much exercise you do every day, and your grades and your outcomes and how much you remember for tests. I never crammed for anything. I didn't do any all-nighters. It wasn't necessary. I got good sleep. I ate good food, and I just drilled down and I worked, and that's about it. And then the rest of it is I interviewed for medical school and got into UC Riverside, and then the rest of it kind of went from there. So that's the story, basically.
What about medical school? When you were applying to medical school?
Specifically, like, how did I go about, what was the strategy?
Yeah, just like the process. How many places did you apply? What are some of the things?
Okay. So I applied to, I think, about 25 medical schools. I got interviews to 5, and I sat 3 interviews. And then when Riverside accepted me, I really liked them. So I just called everybody else and said, I'm good, thanks. And went there. There was no scholarship for me. I'm not that good of a student. I don't know how many scholarships they really offered. It really didn't matter to me too much, because I still had my GI Bill. And that actually paid for the first year of medical school, because I didn't have to tap into it too much during undergrad, because I had scholarships and grants to cover that. If you just could, to go back on the scholarships and grants thing, going to your student resources center and say, what scholarships are available? What grants are available? There's a lot of federal money out there that is just left on the table because nobody asks. If you don't ask for the money, you're not going to get it. So anyway, so medical school, I sat the interviews, and you answer the questions they give you, you make yourself personable, find something that makes you special. So I played the running card. I am an ultra distance runner. And so the idea of running 100 miles in consecutive sequence for the average person is not really conceivable. And so that's a that's a selling point. For those of us in the ultra running community, it's not that big of a deal, but for the common person, it is. And so I knew to play that card, and so I played it a lot. And the Navy, I played the Navy card a lot too with that. So it's something to talk about, as opposed to I got out of high school at 18, I went to college, I did my work, I'm applying to medical school, I don't really have a story, right? So that's a lot of people who don't have much life experience. And so their interview isn't very interesting because, like, well, what did you do? I studied, I got good grades. Anything else? No, that's it. So that's the interview you don't want to have.
What are some of the mistakes that you did that you would, if you do it again, you would change when you were applying?
If I made mistakes, I don't know if I made them. I don't recall any big mistakes. Well, okay. So on my way, I just brought to mind a little anecdote. I was going to my UC Riverside interview, and I traveled there, and I noticed that I had forgotten my belt. And so I had to race to Target or find somewhere that was open at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning that I could buy a belt at. So just make sure your outfit is really picked out, and you've got almost like a checklist. Like, do I have socks? Do I have a belt? Because you're packing your suit or your dress clothes with you. You're not wearing them necessarily to the interview site. You got them in a clothing bag, and so you can forget key items. Or shoes. Did you bring your dress shoes? Probably important. So I didn't really. I think I did rather well in my interviews. It was just, did they like me or not?
And then talk about medical school and how was adjusting to medical school, and you're still running 100 miles every day.
I'm still doing the long distance running stuff. That didn't change. Even through medical school, I still stayed up on my fitness. And medical school, basically the first 2 years is just like college, but a lot more intense. But they do teach to the test. So there's the boards that you have to take and the steps that you have to take, step 1, step 2, step 3 to get your license. And they teach to the test. And so the stuff that I use in clinical practice every day, I didn't really learn in medical school. It's because the tests don't care about conservative pain management solutions and how to really treat diabetes and how to really treat hypertension. They just care about the drugs and the doses and the procedures, which you do have to know as a doctor. So, but how much of that I learned in medical school do I use my practice now? I don't know, maybe 40%, 30%. But the joke in medical school is you will leave medical school and you only use 50% of what you learned. The problem is you don't know which 50% that is. So you have to learn everything. And that's okay. It's funny how little things pop up that, like, oh, I remember learning that in medical school. And I haven't thought about it in 5 years. But then all of a sudden this comes up. Some patient shows up and they have a history of some sort of oddball disease, or they actually get admitted to the hospital. And by the time you're attending, you've seen this game play out several times. So I can envision in my mind what happened during the hospital course, and they're landing to see me for a hospital follow-up, and I can scan the discharge summary and yep, that's what happened. Okay, next. Or I don't have to spend 30 minutes reviewing the chart and doing all that, but that's now. Back when I was a medical student resident, you have to put in the time and poring over the material and realize that this is so new and so alien and so fresh, but it will come if you stick with it and just repetition. And at some point, like 5 years in the future, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years in the future, this will become routine. You're like, well, of course this does that, and that leads to that, and this does that. Like, of course it does. So it's super easy, but it takes a lot of repetition. I had a professor say, I know this, hey guys, I know this is probably your 7th time hearing this lecture about, I think it was like prostate cancer or something. And he's like, that's okay. You're going to need to hear this about 5 more times before it finally sinks in. And so that was my medical school experience. medical school is basically, once you get on the train tracks of medical school, it's really hard to derail yourself off. You will be a doctor unless you do something egregious or something happens in your life that throws you off. But they want you to succeed. They're not here to weed you out anymore. They're like, because if you don't graduate, then that's a mark against the school. They want to be able to say that the entirety of their medical school graduated and the entirety of their schools matched. They don't want to be known as a medical school where they only matched like 50% of their students. That doesn't look like a school anybody wants to go to. Like, why?
Well, yeah, because it affects their ranking, it affects their money, and if they're a state school, it reflects the money that the state gives them. So it's a pretty bad thing. It's not like undergrad. Can you tell them about the transition from your second to third year and what's the difference?
Sure. So first and second year, again, it's just really like high level college. You're in class all day and you study and you work your butt off. And that's about, it's just college, but to 100. Then in our school, we had a little bit different. We did have some clinical experience. We got to work with a primary care physician because, again, we're a primary care school at UC Riverside. That's their main focus. So you would shadow a primary care physician for the first year, for the whole 4 years was shadowing. But we started first year, just stand in the corner, be a good little medical student, seen, not heard, that sort of thing. But it's good experience to have. And so we did that like once every 2 weeks. Then switching over from second year to third year is the big switch, because then it starts your clerkships where you're not in class almost ever. Now you're in the hospital with the team, with the inpatient hospitalist team. So I was with Kaiser most of the time, a little bit with Riverside Community Hospital. And it was just, you show up like you would when you're a resident. You show up to work, you you review the patients, who are the admissions, you do your rounds, you talk about the patients, and then you put in, and you do the work of hospital medicine. And meanwhile, as a medical student, you're learning, and also realize that you're being examined all the time and being analyzed and being judged and being graded. That's just the reality of it. Because at some point, somebody's going to get an evaluation saying, how did this medical student do? Were they motivated? Did they show up early? Did they stay late? Did they contribute to the team? Or were they just sitting back on their phone going through Facebook? You know what? Because the primary care team does not care what you do. They really don't. The medical student is a drag on the team. Usually it usually slows everything down because we have to explain things and teach things. When you got a busy inpatient practice, that's a downside. So if the medical student doesn't insert themselves into the team and really be part of the team, then it's easy to say, oh yeah, where's the medical student? I don't know. Okay, moving on. We were too busy. We don't have time to play babysitter. So, but you, as a medical student, you can be part of the team in that you can do the reading and looking up certain disease states and how to manage things, because the residents, they're working their butts off, actually working on their notes, putting in orders, checking on patients, doing their own reading on things. And so if the medical student says, hey, I looked up this and this and this and this and this, and now you're a knowledge source, you're like a second brain for the team. Now you're useful. Also just volunteering, being always there and being a gopher. And what do they call it? Scut. That's right. Doing scut work. Scut work is essential work. It's got to be done, but residents hate doing it. And so do attendings. Everybody hates doing scut work, but you can make yourself useful by doing the scut work, meaning going down to the lab and finding out what happened to Miss Smith's blood work, or going to the pathology and finding out what the results were and looking at it with the pathologist, and running over here and talk to this nurse there and talk to that person over there and come back to the office. Because then you can, that helps. That really does help the team when you say, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And that'll speak volumes to the overall team. And then when your evaluation comes around, they're going to say, very, very interactive with the team, very helpful. They're just going to talk really nice about you, and that's going to help. Also, you could theoretically be working at that hospital someday when you apply for residency, and they're going to remember you like, oh yeah, that person, they were here 3 years ago and they were great and we really like them. Well, that's going to raise you up in the rankings when the matching comes.
Can
We
you
have a
talk about,
couple-
can you
Oh.
talk about the match?
So the match is an interesting system where how to describe the match? So in a normal job, you interview for the job and you see if you like them, they see if they like you, they give you an offer, you say, maybe, or yeah, sure, or no, right? In residency in medicine, we don't get to do that. At least that second part where you say yes or no. You do the interview, but you do, I did about 20 residencies that I applied to. For me, it was all in Colorado, California, and I'm trying to think what the other state was. Oregon, Oregon. Yeah, I think that was where I wanted to stay in the north, in the kind of the Pacific Northwest. So the match goes, so like, for instance, when I interviewed for Santa Maria, I drove to Santa Maria, I sat the interview, and it's a round robin. You interview with residents, you interview with program director, you interview with other attendings. There's a tour. They do kind of roll out the red carpet for you because they want to entice you to come. So now the role is flipped where they want you to come, as opposed to medical schools. They're trying to screen people out. They're trying to push people away. Whereas residencies, now you're more in the bargaining position. So you sit the interviews and then you say, so Riverside, I really like them a lot. Not Riverside, I mean Santa Maria. So I rank them really, really high. I rank them number 2. So you rank all these places. So I think I sat a total of 15 interviews total. And so you go on the computer and there's a website, you go on this computer and you say, okay, Santa Maria is number 2. Full disclosure, UC Davis was number 1 for me. I don't even remember who number 3 was. And I just go down. And then if there was a place I interviewed that I didn't like, then I just didn't put them in there at all. And that's a tip you'll hear numerous times is if you didn't get a good vibe from that residency, just don't put it on your match list because it's not going to get better. You're not going to show up there and they will have miraculously become a wonderful place that you're going to thrive. No, they're going to be the same place. And for some people, they'll thrive, but maybe not you. So go to the place where you walk away like, that was a really good experience. Yeah, I like that. That was good. Listen to your gut on that one and then rank that program highly. And then you can, and then once you've got kind of your first 10 ranked, then you can kind of wring your hands about like the individual components. Location's important because honestly, every residency has a standard set by the American College of Education, ACGME, medical education. So there's a board, there's a group that monitors all residencies to make sure they're at least doing the minimum. And so you're going to get about the same education no matter where you go. It's just, do you feel like this is going to be a good place where you're going to be able to thrive? And so for me, like I chose Santa Maria because I really like the location. It was nearby mountains. It was on the ocean. So I had access to water and mountains at the same time. So that was kind of nice. And I just got a good feel for the place, low cost of living, and the weather is fantastic in the Central Coast. It's it's kind of like Bay Area weather without Bay Area home prices. So that was that. And so anyway, so I matched, so I rank my 15. Now the residencies do the same thing, but realize that they maybe interviewed 100 people total. So they have to rank all 100 people. And so what they do is all the residents and the attendings, they'll show up to the conference room when all the interviews are done and they sit around, we all sat around a table. This is when I was a resident. We all sat around the table and we just had a PowerPoint slide with each individual applicant. Basically their USMLE scores, maybe some cool facts about them, the picture, and then we would just go down and it would be ranked, it would be sort of loosely ranked, and then it would be like a PowerPoint slide. And then as we go down, the residents would sound off, say like, yeah, we like that person, let's move them up. Oh, that person, they were awkward and weird and a little creepy, let's move them down. And so we would just work our way through those 100 people. And then some people we put on the DNR list and just say, we don't want this person at all. They were just, it didn't feel right. And so we'll just not, we can also choose not to rank someone as well on the residency side. And so then there's a lot of hemming and hawing. It takes about it takes about 2 to 3 hours to go through that whole list to where everyone's very satisfied. Now, of course, the program director and the senior physicians, they have ultimate say, and they can jiggle around the rankings as they see fit, but they do listen to the residents because we have to work with these people. And if they did a clerkship with us, or if they did a sub internship with us, then that's going to raise them up, because like, we know that person, they were solid, we like them. So because they're going to be a colleague and we have to work with them, what, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, sometimes in the hospital. So then, so once we've all ranked, everybody submits, and then this computer basically starts matching. And so for instance, for me, so Davis was my number 1. So Davis apparently didn't care for me all that much, because they never called me. So they maybe have 10, let's say they have 10 people in their per class per year. So they basically say, okay, we like this person. Now, if that person ranked Davis number 1 and Davis ranked that person number 1, then they match, and now that slot's gone. And then number 2, number 3, number 4 on down the list. So, and then that finally, so once that 10th slot is filled, they're done. So how far they go down from that other side. So let's say there's one more. So, but the next several people didn't rank Davis very high. Maybe they just didn't care for the vibe. And so maybe they don't get down till number 20. And so now that 10 slot goes to the next person that ranked Davis not all that high, but they matched. And so then they'll match. And then now they're done. The match is finished. All those other 80 people don't even get a call at all. And so that just keeps playing out over and over and over again. And so, for instance, for me, since Santa Maria was my number 2, and they only have 6 people per year, so they ranked me somewhere at number 1 or number 6. And so I don't know which one I was. It doesn't matter. I don't care. They don't disclose that to us. It's not material. And so then I matched. And once you're matched, you're locked in. You can't say no. I guess theoretically you could refuse to go, but then that puts you into the scramble, and that's not a place you want to be. You don't want to be in, I think they call it SOAP now or something. I don't know what it stands for, but it's called the scramble. Basically, it's all the schools that didn't match.
Supplemental something.
Yeah, something.
But people still call it the scramble.
Yeah, so we call it the scramble colloquially. And so, like, say there's some residency program in Wisconsin where, like, in the wintertime it gets -50 and nobody really wants to go there, then they still have slots. And if you didn't match at any of the places you ranked, if you went to 15 places and nobody wanted you, well, what was that about, right? That's a little odd that you couldn't match at any of the places that you interviewed. That means they didn't rank you very highly if you didn't match at your number. Now that could be for a lot of reasons. It could be the grades at your medical school. We didn't have grades, we had pass fail, but or like your MCAT or your STEP score. Your MCAT scores don't matter anymore. Your STEP scores, there was some vibe that everybody got that was weirding them out and they didn't want you around. I don't know. But then this scramble happens. So this school in Wisconsin say they need slots, and so what they'll do is they will interview you, even though you didn't interview there before. They'll interview you, and if they like you, then you'll go to that school, that residency in Wisconsin. It's not where you wanted to go, but it's residency. And to my previous statement, every residency is about the same. It's just location. And so, and then there you go. That's the match.
Can you talk about residency and what's the difference between residency and med school?
Sure. So in med school, let's say you're in your last year of medical school, your 4th year. You know a thing or two. You know some things, and you're pretty adept at moving around the hospital environment in the medical world because you've been exposed to it now for over a year and a half. So, but you have no responsibility. You really can't write notes because Medicare insurance companies don't accept notes from medical students because you're not licensed, you're not board certified, you're nothing. Don't take that the wrong way. It's a money thing. That's why. you can offer to write the note for the resident, and they're like, and so I did that. And so that's one way to volunteer yourself in third year and fourth year. Say, hey, can I write the note? And the residents usually are like, yes, you can, go for it, because they hate writing notes. We all hate writing notes, to the point where I have a scribe in my practice, as I hate writing notes so much. That's probably the worst thing about medicine is the documentation. Anyway, so in fourth year medical school, you really can't still do anything. You can't order anything. You can't get verbal orders. You can't, but nurses will come to you and they'll say, hey, can you put in orders for something, what's such and such? Because you're wearing the white coat, you look the part. They don't know whether it's long or short. They just see a badge on you and a white coat and they think you can do things. And so they'll say, hey, can you order this, order that? And then the response I give is, I'll talk to my resident about it and we'll see how that goes, right? And so we'll do, that's the way you want to couch that, because you can't say yes or no because you're not a physician yet. Then once you become a resident, you are a physician. You have all the powers and rights and power of it. And if you put an order into the computer, it's going to happen. And that can have consequences. So realize that every time you order something, dominoes start falling. Now, don't let that paralyze you. Like, oh my God, do I order this aspirin for this patient? Because it might cause bleeds. I don't know. So don't paralyze yourself, but just realize there are consequences for your actions once you become a resident. Now, of course, you have your senior residents. You've got your attending. There's people watching over your shoulder, but it's a busy environment. If you want to go off script and do whatever you want, you could. It's going to hurt people and you're going to get in trouble, but you have that power now. You can write prescriptions, and then when you're in the clinic, because you're not in the hospital all the time, when you're in the clinic, you send prescriptions, you have a national prescriber number, you don't have a DEA, you can't prescribe controlled medications. You don't have a DEA license, which, opioids and benzodiazepines and amphetamines and all those, you can't prescribe those. Your attending has to do it. Or if you can get a senior resident to do it for you, that's fine too. Usually you want attendings to be on board with controlled medications when you're a resident. But you have all that power to order things, to refer people to physical therapy and refer people to specialists. And you are interacting with attending physicians and specialists in a way that you never had to as a medical student. So that's the big difference. It's the responsibility and the power that you have at that point.
We have a couple questions in the chat. Someone wants to know, did you consider the HPSP scholarship when applying to med school?
So I did, but it's very competitive and it really wasn't a concern for me because I had the GI Bill that I knew was in my back pocket. And our school had a primary care loan where it was like a super low interest rate. And we were a state school, so it's still a UC. So ultimately my bill walking out of medical school is $150,000, which in the big picture is not that much. So, but what I would recommend, you can do that if you want and look into it, please. But what I found, what's actually a little easier is once you're an attending physician, if you are a primary care and if you're in a rural area or somewhere, some sort of critical access area, like a federal qualified health center, that sort of thing, you can join the National Health Service Corps, which I think that's what that acronym is, right?
The HPSP is the health professions, the military one.
Oh, okay. So I don't know much about that. I think I did look into it a little bit, but it just didn't really. I did not want to go back in the military. That's probably the biggest thing. Didn't want to do that at all. So because I've lived that life. Now, life as an officer in the military is way different than that of a life as a enlisted person, which I was. So there is that, but I didn't want to be sleeping in pools of my own sweat in the desert anymore. And so that was not an option for me. But what you can do is there's that National Health Service Corps, which I think they do offer scholarships, but there's not very many slots, so it's pretty competitive. Now, again, once you go into the attending world, they will actually give you money every 3 years to pay off your loans. So full disclosure, I have $100,000 sitting in a certificate of deposit because I got the money for the loan repayment, but the federal government has been delaying loan payments for the past, 2.5 years. So I haven't had to pay anything on my loans yet, but I have that money that they gave me. And once they make me start paying it off, then I'll just cut them a check for $100,000 and that'll really knock down my loans. And then I can reapply in 2 years and have the rest of it taken care of. So I don't pay anything for loans. My
So
loans
you're
are-
not struggling right now financially as a doctor?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you use your money wisely and don't think you have to keep up with the Joneses and have like the best house and the best car and the best watches and the best, and you can do very well as a physician. I do pretty well. I make plenty, and most of my money actually goes to my retirement fund. I don't spend much money, and
Now, I personally know Isaiah, so he's not a big spender. He's very frugal. So, but you're also a single income, right?
yeah. So I don't have a family. I don't have big financial components. The biggest thing I have is I have 2 cats, and that's my biggest financial obligation I have. So, but I do just take, I don't spend much, and most of my money just goes into my 403b and the stock market. And I just got a nest egg and plan on being financially independent at 55. So I can retire if I feel like it, or just work 2 days a week, whatever I like.
But you're able to live comfortably and you're not starving. And
No.
no, I think the challenge is that most people who don't come from money, to them $150,000 seems a lot. But in California, I think you're starting out as a doctor. It's around $200,000. So
Yeah, more than that. So like for
no, I mean I'm talking about like the bottom.
Yeah, I don't think you could really entice anybody to work for 200, frankly. There's so many, I get text messages, phone calls, emails every single day offering $300,000, $275,000. And I'm primary care and family medicine. No, I'm not all that special. So money's fine. Money's fine. And usually there's incentive packages and like sign-on bonuses and all that. Although in California, they take about half. So if there's a $50,000 sign-on bonus,
you get 25.
You're not getting 50,000. Not really. They make it sound like you are.
But also you get paid in residency too. Not much, but
you're
still
so paid in residency. It's about, I think it was like 50,000 or something like that. First year, and then second year it went up a little bit. And I think in third year I think I just made just shy of 70,000 in third year. So we did pretty well. We did fine. Again, I wasn't starving, doing okay.
Someone else asked, can you describe some of the volunteering you did in community college?
Sure. So in Kenyatta, there was a large Latino Hispanic population. And so I really got involved with that. I had a lot of friends who were from Mexico, El Salvador, Chile, etc. So I got involved with that coalition. And because a lot of the students at Kenyatta were black and brown, and they needed they don't have a background of education. So I have privilege in that my parents were both educated. Even though we were poor, my parents were both educated. They both had bachelor's degrees, and so they knew how to navigate the world in a way that someone without a college education lacks. And so a lot of these people are first in their family to get an education. So I was part of that to help them out in that way, whatever way I could. And what else did I do? I did oddball stuff. I helped do a greening project in Redwood City where we did work for the arborist and trim trees over the sidewalks. And what else did we do? I just said, hey, how can I help? And there's opportunities. There's bulletin boards of people asking for volunteers, all that stuff. And so that was community college. Then in undergrad, I really went full in on the homeless community. And so I was part of the interfaith rotating winter shelter. So in California, a lot of shelters are only operational during the winter, during the rainy season, when it's rather not so much fun to be outside. So we basically organized all the churches. There's a synagogue. I think we started to get the mosque plugged in at Davis, and every week we would rotate to these different churches, and they'd open up their fellowship hall, basically, like where they'd have potlucks, and they would convert that to a living space. And so we would do that, and I was part of the board on that. So we directed policy on how the shelter ran. I also volunteered a little bit with the local homeless resource center as well. I did that. That was pretty much my big volunteering thing. And so that's kind of a pro tip is in your first year of college, you just explore, volunteer different things, see what rings your bell and what you like. And then once you move into like the university level, find that one thing to volunteer in and just double down, because that shows medical schools that you're willing to make a commitment to something and then follow it through, and then move up is there a chain of command? Is there a leadership system that you can get plugged into where, okay, now I'm a junior member on the board, et cetera. If I had been there longer, I could have moved up to president of the board or something like that, but I was only there for 2 years. So I think I did fine in that regard. Then in medical school, the other volunteering thing I did that I'm rather proud of is I volunteered for hospice when I was in medical school. So there's a joke in this session is once you get to medical school, you don't have to volunteer anymore because like nobody cares whether you volunteered or not. Like, and so people do all these volunteering in their undergrad, and then once medical school starts, that just ends. And I just kept it going. And it does help because when you're applying for residencies, they see that. So, and then I also, so I did hospice for 4 years, and that was a very enlightening experience because now I can really speak very intelligently about hospice to patients now, because patients are usually very reluctant and families are very reluctant to engage in hospice, even though it's awesome. So that, and then I also, when I was in Davis, I also worked with the pre-med conference a lot, and that was a big part of it. I helped out Jubin running, I forgot exactly what I did with the conference. I don't know, I did things. I did whatever Jubin told me to do. Jubin said, I need you to do this. I think I do it, or whatever that was. So I did that. And then that also brings to mind, I also went to Honduras and did a medical missions trip there. It wasn't a religious thing. It was just, it was like global medical students, something, I don't remember the title anymore. It's so many years ago, I kind of forget. But you basically go with a bunch of college students, go to some country, they set up a medical facility, they bring doctors with them. Usually they'll bring dentists with them as well. And basically you do primary care for 12 hours a day. And it's always like they have some problem. So here's your problem. And they come in and the patients, they don't have any medical care in some of these countries, like in Honduras. We set up in this church, there was patients around the building. And I think I took blood pressures and helped with pharmacy and did all that. And that was a formative experience too, just to see how good we have it here as far as medical care, because someone comes with leg pain or arthritis in Honduras, you can't send them to physical therapy. You can't refer them to orthopedics. You can give them some Motrin and some Tylenol and tell them good luck. And that's about all I got. And maybe some exercises to help their pain. So, so I did that as well.
Did you consider your age to be a factor when you first started school after the military?
Right. So the age thing is, it's actually, I think it's a double-edged sword. It's an advantage in that I have a wisdom and an experience that those I competed with did not have. Again, the 18-year-old who graduates high school, goes to university, goes to medical school. They've just been in school for years. And I didn't, I did a very alternative path. And so that was an advantage, and that I could speak to more complex things about the world that I existed in. I definitely leveraged that when I was interviewing for medical schools about going to Africa and Iraq, and I had a compelling story, and I knew it, and I leveraged it. So a disadvantage is that I was competing intellectually with very, very smart people and younger than me by 10 years, with brains younger than me by 10 years. And so, but the competition intellectually really wasn't an issue because I was basically competing against the test. So, in the class. And so I saw it as more as an advantage than a disadvantage. I was the oldest person in my medical school. I was the oldest person in my residency, but it never really came up all that much because it's not about how old you are. It's do you know the material? Do you know your medicine? Do you know how to manage patients? Do you know what the next thing is to do? Do you know stuff? Yes or no? Can you do what we ask you to do? Yes or no? And if you can, we don't care how old you are, to a degree.
I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is I think certainly you guys that come from the military, I personally always like to be around the people from the military because and I think you alluded to it a little bit, is people that are in the military know how to work in a system, know hierarchy, know how to follow orders, know how to get tasks done. They know about duty, they know about honor. So I think a lot of you that are in the military or have gone out of the military, you have this incredible amount of strength as an applicant and as a person and as an individual that most other people don't. I mean, as an 18-year-old, you're stuck in the middle of war. You know, you have people shooting over your head. You deal with death and disparities and a world that is not fair and all of these different things. And so I think that you have this great strength that most of you forget, that most people in the real world never experienced that and never not never experienced that and have never been around it. So I think you have this great wealth of experience that you bring to the table that most people in the civilian life don't. And so I think you joked around and said, you know, go get something done, because I knew that if I asked Isaiah to do something because he was older, because he was mature, he wasn't gonna be distracted or forget, or this cute girl would walk around and distract him and get him to not do what he's supposed to do, or forget. It was done. You didn't have to worry about it. But the other part of it too is that your age, it can be used as a strength. One of the things was renting a truck, a U-Haul truck. You're over 25, you could rent a U-Haul truck. If you're under 25, you can't. So I think that a lot of those strengths comes in, and I think, and I don't think you should ever use that as a disadvantage. I think you, as someone who's older, and not in the military, you have this different experience. I mean, we just had someone 2 weeks ago that started med school at the age of 50, you know, and I think you bring in this wealth of experience, but you also have certain limitations, just like anything else in life. So, sorry, Ileana, I didn't want to mean to cut you off, but yeah.
You
So
answered
I
my
think,
question.
yeah. So I think, yeah. So I think I don't think age should ever be an issue, unless you make it yourself. And so it's kind of like, if you think your age is an issue, um then it is. And the other part of it too, Isaiah was always fitter than people half his age, you know, and so so I don't think that that was ever an issue in terms of stamina or any of that stuff. But yeah, that's the only thing I would add. Sorry, Ileana, you wanted to add, I had a question or add to it, or I think you had a
Oh, yeah,
question.
that's basically what I was gonna ask. Like, how do you feel like the military prepared you for medical school? Um, because I was actually a while ago considering joining the military. Not anymore. I have a child, so it's kind of out of the question for me. But I am a little intimidated because I'm 23, I'm still young, but a lot of people my age are already graduating with their bachelor's, and I'm barely gonna finish community college at this age. So it's good to know, like, I still have time, gonna be okay. And I'm working at a hospital now and getting my volunteer hours in, so. Do you have any advice for people who are kind of in a similar situation? Like for me, I have a child, or like maybe people who have family issues and they're kind of a little behind in school.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it in that being a single mother is very difficult to get through medical school. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, but my experience has been that when so my medical school, there were mothers, but everybody had a partner. Everybody was and somehow had a partner. And so because medical school sucks a ton of time. And so having some sort of social support network, so someone can watch the kids while you're grinding away, studying, or I gotta go to the anatomy lab. It's 10 o'clock at night. You've got badge access. You can go anytime you want. There's people who go to the anatomy lab at 1 o'clock in the morning because they'd have the whole place to themselves. So I need to go to the anatomy lab. Who's going to watch my kid? If it's just you, you're not going to the anatomy lab. So having that network, I'm not saying you have to have a partner, but having somebody reliable that can help watch your kid while you do the work is really is important. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, we had actually 5 single moms through pre-med and med school and residency that spoke a few months ago. So put that link up there.
Yeah, so it's possible, but it's definitely playing the game on hard mode.
The other thing is I was going to ask you is when you were in when you dealt with discouragement through undergrad and med school, and how did you handle it and how did you overcome it?
Well, being always active, I would often use exercise as my release. So usually I always felt better after a run or a workout or something like that. So that helped. I didn't have a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice when I was an undergrad, so I didn't have that resource to tap into like I do now. So if something set me back, I just pushed forward and kept on going. And that military aspect of, you have a setback, so what? Suck it up. Let's go. Let's just because you had a setback doesn't matter. You just keep pushing.
I'm just kind of curious, during med school, how did you manage your time? Did you use a schedule? Was it kind of all in your head? Did you write a to-do list? I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do.
I had it mostly in my head, but I got up. I had a routine. I would get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd get ready. I would go. I didn't stay home much. I would just go to the campus, and we had study areas, and I would just study in the morning. I would usually eat breakfast while studying. So I wouldn't like have breakfast to just sit there and have breakfast. I would be doing something while having breakfast. And then our first class is usually 8 o'clock or so. Not always. Classes were always kind of random. So you just have to be really on top of the schedule so you show up to what you show up to. All classes are recorded. And so some people, they didn't do well in class. They didn't do well in the classroom setting. And so they rarely went unless they had to. And then they would just watch the recording. The upside of that is you can do other stuff and then watch the recording at 1.5 times speed or 2x speed for some people. So I didn't do that too often. Sometimes we had some professors with some thick accents, and I didn't really understand them very well in class. And then I didn't go to those classes and watch the videos so I could rewind it, say, what did he say? Rewind it. Oh, okay, that's what he said. And that's how I would go through it. So I didn't really have a schedule. I always showed up to class. That was just me. Everyone learns differently. So every school should have their stuff recorded. All the lectures should be recorded online rather quickly too. They have a whole IT team on campus that just deals with the videos and all that stuff. And then class was done. I'd usually do some sort of exercise in the afternoon, whatever it was, and then I would study until, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night, whatever like that. I mean, I would study just all day, and then I'd go to bed and do it all over again the next day.
Get another question too. Someone asked, what benefits, not financial, did the military give you for medical school? I have considered joining the military after college and then going to med school.
So the military after med school, the only benefit they give that I would want to emphasize is health insurance. So when you're young, you don't think about health insurance because you take your health for granted, and you don't really need the medical system all that much when you're young for most people. However, as you get older, things come up and you don't know what those things are. That's why it's called insurance. So once you get out, make sure you sign up for VA, Veterans Affairs Administration, because if you don't sign up within a certain time, you're no longer eligible. I don't know what the rules are anymore, but when I came up, it was if you don't enroll in the VA 5 years after you get out, you don't get to access that resource. And when insurance premiums, when you're an adult, especially if you have kids, when insurance premiums are $500-600 a month, that's real money. And I don't pay anything for my insurance, and my copays are low, and I don't see my doctor all that often anyway, but I have that resource. And that, I think that's one thing that young people don't really pay, like, health insurance, whatever, what's that? They don't need it. But when you start getting into your 30s and 40s and 50s, that really starts mattering. As far as other resources the military gives,
I would say the only thing is I would tell you is that going in the military, some people look at it as a calling, as a duty. If you really want to if you really want to be in the military, do it after you're done with medical school, because once you're done as a trained doctor, the military needs doctors, and what they do is you're not on a scholarship. They give you a huge signing bonus, and if you have a specialty they really need, and then the other part of it too is you come in at a much higher rank. And so I've had friends that have gotten into the military post residency as majors, and that's huge. Couple of things. It helps you in your basically you're higher on the food chain as an officer. Second, you could be selective where you want to go a little bit. And the other part of it too, your paycheck is going to be much higher, and your retirement is going to be much higher. So, and they give you a huge signing bonus. Basically, I had a friend who's a vascular surgeon who decided to join I think the Army, the Navy, but his signing bonus was $275,000. And that would basically pay off his student loans and everything. So, so if you really want to do military and medical school, think about doing it after you're done, if you can do that, the financial part of it, but also the hierarchy and all that other good stuff. But you could also do the HPSC scholarships in medical school. So there's, because the other part of it too is the lower you are on the food chain as well. So if you graduate college, you may be able to get in as an officer, but you're at a very low ranking officer, and they're going to have you stay longer than you want, or you have less flexibility. So the more educated, the higher rank you are, the more flexibility you have. Does anybody have any other questions? I think Ileana had a question too.
No, I was just checking the.
I have a question. After residency, how hard was it to find a job, and were you able to be selective, or you you took what was available to you?
So once you get your DEA license, which is the last license you'll likely get, that gives you the permission to prescribe controlled medications. By then, you'll have your medical license at that point in your last year of residency, because you're ready to launch. And so what happens is, once I've noticed that I got my DEA in middle to late January of my last year of residency, and then all of a sudden all these emails started flowing in, and text messages and phone calls, headhunters. So there's whole companies out there whose job is to seek out doctors and get them into positions. So if you can be as picky as you want, because people are going to call you and say, hey, we have an opportunity in this part, that part. And if you want to go somewhere else, you just tell that recruiter, hey, I want to go to Ohio. I want to be in Toledo. I want to be here. I want to do that. They will find you that spot, and they will work it out if you want to be super specific. And so what I did is I was just open, and I was willing to go just about anywhere, as long as it was rural medicine, because that's what I like to do. Rural medicine gives me the options to practice medicine at the top of my license, and do things that normally doctors don't get to do, primary care doctors get to do in an urban area. So I get to do a lot of procedures that a primary care doctor doesn't do, because they can just refer to the specialist that's down the street. I don't have any specialists down the street. It's just me. So for a patient to see a specialist, they have to drive an hour and a half somewhere else, which they don't want to do, and they'd just rather me do it. Others, they say, like, no, I want to drive 4 hours down to Davis and see a specialist. Like, go for it. That's cool. But you can go wherever you want. You're going to get headhunted like crazy. And I still get headhunted like crazy, even now. And so you can really negotiate what you want. So for me, my main negotiating point was a scribe. And so I use there's a scribing company called Augmetics, and they have a scribe that's on a phone, and it's just sitting on a stand in the office, and there's a person on the other side, and it's live streaming, and they're documenting the encounter for you. So I don't have to be looking at my computer all that much, and I can actually look at the patient, and I don't have to worry about spending 3 hours after work, creating 20 notes from scratch, which, if that takes 5 to 10 minutes each, that's real time. So that was my main negotiating point. If money's more important and you're okay with working an extra 2 to 3 hours after clinic documenting the encounters that you did, then negotiate for more money. You can do that. But you are in the driver's seat. Once you have that license, once you have your DEA, once you're board certified, you can write your own ticket. You really have a lot of control over what your compensation package is. They want you. I think that's the thing, is they want you more than you want them.
The other thing is, since you are in a clinic now, can you talk about how undergraduates and pre-meds can get involved and be an asset to clinics?
So what you want to do is basically get on the phone and just cold call every physician office that you want to work in. So if you are interested in orthopedic surgery, you call every single orthopedist in town and say, hey, I'm interested in medicine, I'm interested in orthopedics. Can I shadow you, once a week, or one day, or once, just one day? Just make the cost to entry like super low, because we're really busy and we're running around. And so to take on a medical student or take on a learner is extra. So some doctors really love to teach, some doctors don't. And and so you just cold call over and over and over again. And eventually you're going to have someone who's going like, yeah, sure, you can come by, once a week or once a month and hang out. How to be useful? It's hard for a pre-med to be useful because I have medical assistants. They do all the stuff I need to do. There are certain protocols that have to be adhered to, and in the medical assistants, the coders, they all do that stuff. So really, I wouldn't want you to come on to do anything for me. I would just say, hang out with me and be a sponge and learn. And if you want to be a little useful, you can look up stuff for me, because like I have new stuff coming across my way every single day. Like I've never seen that before. That looks different. And so, hey, I might say, hey, look up this thing for me and do that. So basically again, back to clerkships, being an extra brain, that maybe be the only way you could possibly be useful in a doctor's office that's got a busy practice, which every practice is busy. So that's the way to do it.
What about if you speak a foreign language? How useful can you be?
Well, so it depends. If you're with a company, so if you're with like Kaiser or you're with like Dignity, for me, you have to be a certified translator. You just can't say, oh, I can speak fill in the blank language and I'll be a translator for you in the patient room. Well, can you translate as a person? Can you translate complex medical terms into a language that the other person can understand? Do you have a working knowledge of medicine and how things work? You probably don't. And so you have to go through some tests and get certified. Now, do some doctors' offices skip that? Sometimes. If you're in private practice, you can do whatever you want. But the law says you have to have a certified translator translate for you. You can't just have the kids. So people do this, they'll bring their kids in and their kids will translate for them, for the parents. Not okay, you're not allowed to do that. Does everybody do that to some degree because of limitations? Yes, but we have translators that we pay to do that for us. And so that's unfortunately not really a service that can be provided unless you say, I will take the test and be a medical translator for you and get on board for that. So some practices might be looking for that, but now you're looking for a job and that's different.
So let's say if a pre-med approaches you, what do you look for in them and what would you expect from them in terms of behavior and all that good stuff?
Oh, it's what I think of as the basics, but maybe aren't the basics. A professional attitude and a willingness to learn and being very easy with the phrase, I don't know. I'm going to look that up and tell you later. That's the phrase I still use. I've been in practice on my own for a while now, and I still use that with patients. And when they ask me a question about stuff, people ask random stuff, and I don't know everything, and I don't have the time to look it up right now. So I say, I don't know, but by the time we talk next time, I will, and I'll let you know. Or sometimes I don't know, and I say, you're gonna have to talk to your cardiologist about that because I have no idea how that works. And the specialists do still have access to a lot of esoteric knowledge that is not in the public sphere. It's not on up to date. It's in some article in the American College of Cardiology literature, and they know that stuff. I'm a primary care doctor. I don't, and that's okay. And so basically for a learner, for someone, whether you're a pre-med, medical student, resident, it's still that professionalism and willingness to learn and willing to look up stuff.
Can you talk about professionalism a little bit?
So professionalism. What is professionalism? It's hard to describe what professionalism is. And it's basically taking the patient seriously, because it is tempting, because sometimes some people are so outrageous that it's very tempting to make fun of them and behind their backs especially. And it happens all the time in medicine. It's called the hidden curriculum. You might have heard of that. The hidden curriculum, it's basically, it's how we interact with patients and then what we really, like, it's what the textbooks say and what the tests say, but what we really do. and how we treat patients and how we talk about patients behind their back. We all do it. We all talk about patients behind their back because sometimes they're irrational. They're people. People are irrational. People they ask for things that are beyond the pale of possibility, or they have expectations, and just their behaviors are outrageous and out of control. And how we release steam is we do that. And so that would be an example of poor professionalism. But it's also endemic in medicine for us to do that because we're frustrated with the system, and that's our venting system. So being professional is basically taking the patient seriously when you're in the room with them, and whatever ridiculous stuff they say, and they say some ridiculous things, you take them seriously and you nod and say, that's very interesting. Okay, tell me more about that. And that's professionalism. And treating them well, treating them like if this was your mother, or this was your relative, this was your loved one, how would you care for them? Which may not be how they want to be cared for. Because patients, what they want and what is appropriate are not often, sometimes not in conjunction with each other. And so just doing what's best for the patient, really, that's professionalism, doing what's best for the patient.
I meant professionalism for pre-med when they're shadowing and all of those things. Volunteering.
So professionalism when you're volunteering, and that is basically when you're in the room with the patient, you're shadowing, the best thing to do is be quiet, which is very difficult to do. At least it was for me. And because the physician is interacting with the patient. And if you pipe up with something, now it derails their train of thought, it derails the conversation. So be very careful with interjecting. And it can be a little irritating when the physician's talking to the patient and there's a third person over here chiming in on things. And that's not much, that's just not very good. So basically, when you're in the room and you have questions or thoughts or suggestions, realize you're a guest. And so you have to be on your very best behavior. And write all the questions down. I have a little notebook. I always had a notebook with me when I was a medical student, and I would just write down all sorts of things. I would write down words that the doctor was saying that I didn't know, disease processes that I didn't understand, medications I didn't know. So I would just be taking notes throughout the entire visit pretty much, and also listening to the back and forth between the physician and the doctor and that relationship. And like, I noticed you asked this question at this time, what was that? And so I would just write all this stuff down. And then when the encounter was concluded and we're at lunchtime now, or after we're, all the clinic's closed for the day, then I would pipe up and say, okay, I know she did this. Could you explain that? Or could you tell me more about this? So pick a few things to mention to the physician, because again, they've got their documentation to do. They've got labs to review. They've got imaging to review. They've got patients to call. They've got prescriptions to sign. They're very busy. And so to ping them with 100 questions is not going to make you very popular. So just asking a couple questions and then looking up, and realize that most of this stuff you can look up on your own. And you can Google what is pulmonary embolism. You can do that, right? You don't have to ask, asking what is questions is not a good use of the physician's time. Don't ask for definitions of things. Don't ask what is this, because there's Google for that. You can look that stuff up. But how did you come to this decision? How did you think, what made you decide this? What made you decide this drug over this drug, or this intervention or that intervention? Or I noticed you didn't mention to the patient, so what's your position on lifestyle change? Because I do a lot of, again, primary care. A lot of my stuff is lifestyle medicine. And some patients, I've already spoken to them about lifestyle change and all that, and they have no motivation for change. They like their life the way it is. They realize it's causing them health problems, and they're okay with that. So I may come into the room and we'll just talk about their symptoms and the disease and what medications I'm doing, and not say a whit about lifestyle. And it may come off to the medical student or the learner that, well, why aren't you talking about lifestyle to the patient? Well, because they and I have gone around on this topic already numerous times a year ago, and they're just as disinterested now as they are. And also, body language is big. You can just tell when someone isn't really into something. So basically, again, in summary, professionalism for a learner is more, you want to stay as quiet as possible. You want to be out of sight. You want to be out of the range of vision, be present, be attentive. Don't be on your phone. I have to say that, but apparently I have to say that, is be present and almost put yourself in the doctor's chair and say, okay, how would I ask this question? What would I be doing? And so your brain's always moving all the time. So you're not tempted to check out. Dress well, that's the other one. Dress professionally. Dress in accordance to the clinic. So I wear scrubs in clinic every day. So if the medical student or the learner or the pre-med comes in wearing a shirt and tie, it's just weird because we're a rural area. Nobody wears shirts and ties. Our CEO of our hospital doesn't wear that stuff. He just wears a button down and slacks. So it's very casual. Other practices are super formal. Everybody's wearing a white coat. Everybody's wearing a tie. So that's what you wear. But
you look good in a shirt and tie.
Well, thank you. But I hate wearing them because the cleaning bill, again, saving money, it's way cheaper to wash my own scrubs than it is to take these all these shirts and ties and stuff to the cleaners and have them wash them for me. So also I do a lot of procedures. So I get blood and pus and all sorts of fun stuff on my clothes. And I had one guy bleed all over me on my slacks one day when I did a knee injection. And those slacks were gone. I had to throw them out. I'm like, okay, we're done. Scrubs from here on out.
Any other words of wisdom about learners and pre-meds around you that you think of?
Just the biggest take home is write down questions, write down terms you don't know, learn those terms because you will have to know them. You will have to know these disease processes backwards and forwards. You will have to know the natural history of disease. You will have to know how to manage disease at every single step of the way. So the sooner you learn that, the better off you are. Asking critical questions, more how questions, as opposed to what are questions. And bringing in papers like, oh, this patient yesterday had this condition. I found some cool literature articles on the topic. Whether anyone reads them or not is immaterial. It's more like you showed initiative, and without someone asking you, you actually went to the New England Journal and you looked up the latest literature on heart failure and the medications for heart failure, right? So that shows initiative. No one asked you to, but you did anyway.
But also having a journal is really important because a lot of those secondary questions will come from, tell us one of your experiences, and keeping a journal is really important. Can you tell everybody what your day is like as a family doc in a rural clinic? Sure.
So I work 4 days a week. We call them 410. So we work 10-hour days. It's more like 11, frankly. So for me anyway, so my day starts at 7 o'clock. So I'm up at 5, I do some exercise, I do some stretches, I get ready for my day. I don't roll out of bed and go straight to work. I find that's too stressful. I wake up actually extra early and I give myself basically 2 hours to get to work. So I can have my coffee and relax and kind of ease my way into work and not feel rushed. So then 7 o'clock starts, I'm tidying up notes that weren't done yesterday, and then going over labs, going over images. I have an hour in the beginning of the day to do my scut work, right? I have to go over all that stuff. Communicate with my staff. We also review the patients for the day. We call it the huddle. We huddle, say, okay, I'm doing a biopsy here. I'm doing this there. I'm doing an injection there. Oh, this lady, you got to ask her this. Oh, by the way, this person's a trans male. So their name is Phil, not Susie. Okay. So like that kind of just getting ready for the day. And then 8 o'clock is the first patient. And then I just see patients. 8 o'clock, I see the patient. It can be whatever. It can be a Medicare wellness visit. It can be a sick visit. It can be just checking up on their diabetes or their blood pressure or whatever. All number of things. It's a crapshoot. It's random. People can come in with a chief complaint of X on the chart, but they actually say, you know what? Actually, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about this instead. So they'll throw you a little curveball. And so my visits are between 30 minutes and 50, somewhere in the 15 minute range, depending on the complexity. I don't have a high patient load expectation on my end. I only have to see about 18 patients a day, and which in the big picture is not that many. Some doctors see 25, 30 patients a day, which I don't, I'm not a big fan of that. That just makes it way too rushed. The reason they do that is because there's a financial incentive to do so. If you see more patients and you bill at the same level, then you can get more compensation for it. So that's something you don't have to worry about for now. But so I see patients all morning, then lunchtime hits. I catch up on my inbox because that inbox never goes to zero. It's always creeping on you. So you got to really stay on your inbox. I have colleagues that have 70 items in their inbox, and it's like, it's unmanageable at that point. Patients, if patients don't know what their labs are, if patients don't know their imaging is okay, you got to tell Ms. Smith, hey, your mammogram was fine, right? Now you can turf this out to your staff to say, hey, call Ms. Smith and tell her mammogram is fine. But that message still has to get done, because the thing I hate the most is when patients say, oh yeah, I had imaging done 3 years ago or 10 years ago. Nobody ever told me what it was, which bugs the heck out of me. So I always make sure patients know what their results are on things. It's just good courtesy and good medicine to do that. So that's lunch. I don't have a lunch per se. I eat while I work, because if this work doesn't get done now, I got to wait till the evening to do it. It's got to get done. So I just do it during lunch. And then I see another block of patients starting at 1 o'clock until about 4:30 or so, maybe 5. And then I tidy up on notes. I tidy up on my inbox. And I'm usually out of the clinic by about 5:30, 5:45, somewhere on there. And I'm on the mountain running trails at about between 6 o'clock and 6:15. And then I go to bed at 9 o'clock p.m. and then it all starts over again the next day.
You only get to work 4 days a week. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but they're long days. They're long. It's by the time Thursday afternoon rolls around, my brain is pretty sizzled, and I feel a little punchy at that point. So we also do a walk-in clinic as well. It's like urgent care. We don't call it that, but we have an urgent care. And so if I work on a Saturday, I get that Thursday off. So it's still 4 days a week. So I get 3-day weekends every single week.
Do you have to do any hospital stuff?
I have the option to do so. I'm not a big fan of hospital work. I don't care for it. So I chose not to do it. I like the clinic world. Just me.
Very cool. So if anybody have any other questions, ask it now or forever hold your peace. But yeah, we're gonna wait a minute. It was good seeing you.
Yeah, you too.
All right. I don't think we have any other takers, and our time is up. So I'm sure you have other things to do. Thank you